This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
Real Talkers, we continue our coverage today of one of the biggest stories in Canadian politics. That is the leak of nearly 3 million Albertans' private voter data. This is a story that if it has not yet resonated with you, it needs to. And today's episode should reiterate exactly why, as we welcome a longtime RCMP major crimes investigator, a retired deputy chief and current security consultant to the program to give us a sense of what the RCMP investigation into this leak will likely look like and an idea of what the potential implications are. You may not be a judge, you may not be a crown prosecutor, you may not be a survivor of domestic violence, but that doesn't mean the public exposure, the public spread of your personal data, which is more than just what would have been in the phone book in the 1980s, of what those implications could actually be. We'll get to some of the comments we've received in our email inbox to talk@ryanjespersen.com. We'll be taking a look at what our live tuning audience is saying in our live chat powered by Park Power as we welcome to the program retired Deputy Chief Neil LeMay. That's coming up in 30 seconds. Before we get there, want to let you know this episode of Real Talk is happening with the presenting sponsorship of our friends at RapidX Financial. This is a partnership that we're proud of, a made-in-Alberta solution online at rapidxfinancial.com. You know, the crypto world moves fast, and that means that you need to be able to trust your exchange. RapidXfinancial.com is what I use when I'm moving my Bitcoin. A reminder, I'm never going to give you financial advice, and you should always talk to your financial advisors before you make any moves. But if you are into Bitcoin or anything else, keeping an eye on it, you're going to like the fact that RapidX Financial is secure, it's FinTrack registered, and critically, it's non-custodial, meaning you always control your keys. I mean, that needs to be an absolute. And that's what this made-in-Alberta solution has rolled out. There's 3 ways to use RapidX Financial. You can use their website, which we're showing you now. You can check out the show notes for more on that. They've got the physical crypto ATMs, much like the Rapid Cash ATMs they've had across the country for the last 25 years or so. They also have an over-the-counter desk for discrete, larger value trades, or maybe for those that could use a little human guidance. That's been me. That's been me too. I feel you. RapidXFinancial.com also with an exclusive offer for Real Talkers. Make sure you use the promo code Ryan50, all one word, when you're making your trades. And that'll knock 50% off fees on all your online Interac e-transfer trades. All of them. That's the promo code Ryan50, all one word, at RapidXFinancial.com. A pleasure to welcome to our Real Talk studio in the historic Mercer Warehouse in downtown Edmonton, retired Deputy Chief Neil LeMay. Neil was a longtime major crimes investigator with the RCMP. He's now working as a global security consultant, making your Real Talk debut. It's nice to have you here. Thanks for making time.
Well, thank you for having me.
It would have been nicer if we were having you here talking about hypotheticals, talking about big picture stuff, but instead we're talking about a scenario where about 3 million Albertans have been made vulnerable as an activist group with the alleged assistance of a political party in Alberta has leaked the voter data of about 3 million people. You're a former major crimes investigator, but you're also an Albertan. How are you wrapping your mind around the story?
Well, I find it personally very frightening. To use the term dangerous is not an overstatement. I think for most people, you know, this seems rather esoteric or out there somewhere, and it doesn't really affect them. But basically, what the separatist group has done is provided a target list for fraud, for intimidation, for all sorts of nefarious activities. That has the name of every voting Albertan on it, along with their address. And now those are the 2 building blocks. Those are the 2 essential building blocks for identity theft. And with identity theft, of course, you can commit all sorts of frauds. And the real Ryan Jespersen, let's say, the bona fide one, he'll never know that his financial information is being manipulated till the police show up with a warrant at his door saying he's under arrest for fraud. That's, these things criminals and fraudsters, they start building dossiers on individuals that they think they can target. And once you've got the name and the address, all sorts of things can happen. Excuse me. So over the last 20, 30 years, all of us have been leaving bits and pieces and cookie crumbs and trails on the internet, social media. Something as simply as wishing somebody happy birthday, happy 40th birthday. I hear it's your birthday today. Well, it doesn't take a mathematician to work it backwards and figure out what that person's date of birth is. So now they have your address, your name, and your date of birth. Now, if you post stuff online on social marketplaces, community markets, that stuff, there's a good chance they're going to get your phone number and your email as well, depending on how secure those sites are. And most of them aren't. They're community run. So now they've got those pieces of information. Now they've got your phone number. So they call your phone, and your phone goes to voice message. And you've got a personal message on there saying, "Hi, this is Ryan. I'm not here. Leave me a message." Well, now they scrape that off using various tools that are available openly. So now they've got your voice. Throw in AI into the mix. Now they can manipulate your voice. So now they can manipulate your voice to the point where they can fool the voice identification systems of the major banks. Now that guy picking bottles in your back alley, he might be the homeless guy picking bottles so he can buy himself lunch, but he may also be looking for financial information, your tax returns, your notice of assessment, your financial statements from your banks and your credit institutions, your credit card information. So now there's another piece they've picked up. They've got your personal banking information with your account numbers. With that information, you don't stand a chance. You don't stand a chance. The banks will come back after you've lost all your money and offer you some credit monitoring services. The horse is already out the barn, and it's too late to close the barn door. It's done.
For the person that would say, "You sound a little paranoid, Neil. You sound like you got to get your tinfoil hat fitted." How common is this?
Well, it's not hard to find people that have been victims of identity theft. I've had money stolen from my bank accounts. I've had my credit cards compromised. I've paid for people taking vacations in the Canary Islands. Fortunately, I was reimbursed by the credit card company. So you never know who's working inside these companies that's skimming information, credit card information, that's holding on to information, and that can be sold. And yeah, I'm a little paranoid. There's no doubt about that. But just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean they're after your data. After your data.
I would probably suggest that you might just be a little bit more street smart than paranoid. You probably don't. To reiterate to people, an RCMP, a 30 plus year career in law enforcement, an RCMP major crimes investigator, you have been assigned through the course of your career to the most serious crimes that the province of Alberta, in other jurisdictions as well, have seen, right? You're looking at the homicides, you're looking at the major frauds, that sort of a thing.
Yeah, mostly the major crimes units are dealing with crimes, what we call crimes against persons, assault, murder, sexual assault, kidnapping, extortion, those sorts of things. Included in that is a lot of terrorist investigations. 9/11, I was assigned to the task force of the RCMP for those investigations. We have to keep in mind that there's very organized terrorist groups out there who fund themselves through this type of fraud. That's how they make their money to run their terrorist operations, to support their safe houses, support their purchase of weapons and cars and all that sort of stuff. So there's those people out there in addition to your run-of-the-mill criminals. So they're out there and they're looking for opportunities. For a guy like me, I'm 65 years old. I won't give you the day I was born on, but keeping up with all these things that are occurring on the World Wide Web, the internet, and being secure against it, I can't do it. And I have a little bit of computer savvy, but we rely on governments to protect us. And in this case, the government has failed miserably.
Okay, Let's dig into that. I want to circle back to what people can do. We're going to give you, Real Talkers, the tools as best we can to protect yourself, to try to unwind some of the damage that those associated with the Centurion Project have created, that they have inflicted upon you and 3 million other people here in Alberta. If you can pick up or sense the seething rage in my belly around this, congratulations on the intuition, because this is something that has prompted dozens and dozens of emails to us. The interest in our coverage of this story over the past week has been off the charts because, Neil, I think that everybody that hears it is slowly coming to the realization, some immediately, some are taking a little bit longer, recognizing that everybody's at risk. 3 million people have been put at risk. What does the government have to do with it? You say the government's let Albertans down. How?
Well, this goes back to the changes the Justice Minister made with Bill C-54, changing the Elections Act. That is really where the breakdown started. So the changes were, prior to the changes made in 2025, the Elections Commissioner had the authority under the provincial statute to investigate wherever he deemed it warranted. So that's a pretty low bar in the world of investigations. And it's pretty much the common standard for commencing an investigation. So bearing in mind that there are several other scandals involving ministers and contracts and financial payments and sole sourcing and relatives of various ministers in the government, all involved in one big intertwined mess. The Elections Commission at that time was investigating relatives or a relative of the Justice Minister. The Justice Minister goes in and does something that's never been done, to my knowledge, for sure in Canada. And I actually researched this yesterday because it was kind of a burning question for myself when I saw it, and possibly North America. So what the Justice Minister did is he changed the authority or the threshold for the elections to be conducted, or pardon me, investigations to be conducted by the Elections Commissioner. He went from whenever warranted to reasonable and probable grounds. Now, it's important to understand the difference. Just a little bit of history. Since Sir Robert Peel created the first police forces 100 and some years ago, or 200 and some years ago, the standard has always been that the police and investigative services are pretty much free to investigate any matters they deemed requiring investigation. There was no need for this threshold of reasonable, probable, and probable grounds. Normally what happens is that police receive some information, or they even read about it in the media, because that's an excellent source of information about potential criminal activity. And the first thing they do is, if it's a complaint made by somebody, is they go talk to that person and they gather the information that person has. So the first stage is a gathering of information. The second step is it's called basically a triage. So you look at the information the complainant provided to you, or the victim, or the witness, or whatever the case may be, and you look at it from the perspective of, is this frivolous? Is this vexatious? Is this somebody trying to even a score that's got a personal vendetta against somebody? So you look at the bona fides of the information. Again, you still don't have a full-blown investigation at this part. You're doing some preliminary inquiries. The next step is, if you get past the triage stage and you go, okay, there's something here. Normally, the first step is you want to identify what the offense is. Is it theft? Is it breach of trust? Is it fraud? So you want to be able to identify something that falls within your area of jurisdiction if you're going to investigate. The next step is you start gathering the facts. So far we've gathered information. Now we're going to gather the facts.
What can be proven?
Well, that's the first stage. It goes through a couple of other processes as well before we get to the what can be proven. So you go out and you start conducting interviews, voluntary interviews. Talk to witnesses, talk to people involved. You gather video evidence, you gather audio evidence that's in the public domain. And there's another reassessment once that step has been done. You've sort of gathered the non-coercive, non-invasive information. Once you do that, you look at what you got and you make a decision. It's a go or no-go point here, because the next step requires reasonable and probable grounds. So we're now at the fourth step, requiring reasonable and probable grounds. This is when you go to your coercive or invasive investigative procedures, search warrants, wiretaps, production orders, subpoenas for documents, all sorts of things that a person normally has a right to privacy on. You go to a judge, you make application, you lay out the facts that you've gathered for the judge in an affidavit or an information it's called, and the judge reads it over as an independent arbiter, and he goes, yes, you have reasonable and probable grounds to proceed, and he authorizes the warrant. Or he punts it back to you and says, sorry, you fell short. Go back and investigate some more. But what the Justice Minister has done is he's turned this upside down. And he's actually made it impossible for the Election Commissioner to actually conduct an investigation. He's got the reasonable, whoops.
You're a hand talker just like me, Neil.
I'm a hand talker, yeah. I'm swatting things around.
That's
here.
okay, you're passionate.
So what he's done is he's put the reasonable and probable grounds in step 4 prior to step 1. So effectively, he's handcuffed the Elections Commissioner. He's handcuffed the Elections Commissioner to the point where there is no way any elections investigation will be conducted in the protocol that now exists under the Elections Act. The Commissioner is absolutely right when he says, I didn't have reasonable and probable grounds, because there's no mechanism under the changes made by the Justice Minister to gather reasonable and probable grounds.
Here's Lisa Johnson's reporting for the CBC. I'm showing it on my screen right now. This is May 10th of 2025, so almost exactly a year ago. The headline of Lisa's report on the CBC: Alberta's Chief Electoral Officer warns proposals in Bill 54 will hurt investigations. Again, Real Talkers, this is a story from 1 year ago. In documents sent to Justice Minister Mickey Amery and all legislature ministers and obtained by the Canadian Press, Chief Electoral Officer Gordon McClure 1 year ago warns that some changes in the bill, Bill 54, will reduce the election commissioner's ability to investigate and enforce compliance with election law, including financial contributions and rules and limits. So the warning was there.
The warning was there. I mean, any first-year legal student would read that and come to the same conclusion. So the Justice Minister is a very capable lawyer. He understands reasonable and probable grounds. He understands investigative process. So the question I'm left with is, why did the minister make those changes? That, coupled with the time limit on investigations, on reporting of investigations, you don't do these things in a couple months. It takes literally years to conduct an investigation of this sort. So I'm not saying that the government did this on purpose to stymie elections investigations, but the end result is they couldn't have planned a better way to neuter the Elections Commissioner if they had set out to do that. What they've achieved, whether they intended it or not, is to make the Elections Commissioner basically a non-entity. And he's not a watchdog. He's there as an officer of the legislature to protect ordinary voters, not to protect relatives of government ministers, not to deflect from so-called scandals that might be existing, contracting, that sort of thing. And I think this is a huge erosion of the democratic principles that have guided the legislature since 1905. Nobody's done this before. But then again, nobody has ever decided to go with Alberta independence as the current UCP government.
You referenced relatives of ministers. You referenced scandals. I mean, my job is to drill in on that. And sure. I assume that you're referencing Sam Marais, the CEO of MHCare, who is a relative of Justice Minister Mickey Amery. Mr. Marais directly tied to questions and investigations around the alleged healthcare procurement scandal, which is still continuing. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's one of one investigation. There's also issues with what are called, as I understand it, and I haven't really looked deeply at this. I'm just relying on media reporting, what's called strawman contributions to political parties, which is not permitted under the Elections Act, but it seems to be that there's some evidence out there that allegedly someone in Mr. Mauritius' circle or is being investigated for strawman contributions.
I'll let that sit for a second. We're talking to retired Deputy Chief Neil LeMay, a longtime major crimes investigator with the RCMP, now a global security risk consultant. In our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. In our live chat, powered by Park Power, Plain Power says rules mean nothing to the separatist. It's win at all costs, no matter who is damaged. There's nothing about fairness. These are just people that are making big bucks behind the scenes. Others of you, like Tracy, I won't put words in your mouth, Tracy, but it sure sounds like you're feeling betrayed, certainly frustrated. Tracy says fraud and cyber fraud certainly doesn't need to be helped out by the provincial government. Just Joe says it's criminal to steal this information and then to flaunt it online. Sean, who's watching our live stream presented by California Closets on LinkedIn this morning. Shout out to Real Talkers that are catching us live on LinkedIn. Sean says that the credit system is entirely broken because in Canada we have no consumer protections. Banks won't help you if your identity is stolen. I want to get back to what people can do, Neil, in this situation. I want to ask you about the RCMP investigation. There was I don't know if you call it a show of force, but there's some strategy to it, isn't it? When a bunch of officers and a bunch of patrol cars are deployed to a situation to make seizures or otherwise, oftentimes, at least in old school, when I was coming up in media, we'd get a tip through the assignment desk, if the perp walk, that kind of idea. Get your take on the RCMP's capability to investigate this right now. More with Neil LeMay in just a moment. Before we get there, I want to let you know that if you are flying anytime, Real Talkers, starting this week and moving forward in perpetuity through Edmonton's International Airport, you're going to want to know about YEG Plus. This is Canada's first airport loyalty program. Couldn't be more simple to sign up and to use it. Oh my gosh, you earn 1 point for every dollar you spend at the airport. That could be parking, grabbing a bite, doing a little shopping before your flight. And as your points build, you move up tiers. You unlock perks like bonus points, partner discounts, even free parking. How nice would that be? You can also redeem your points for gift cards, exclusive offers, and a whole lot more. So the next time you're at YEG, make sure you're getting rewarded. You can sign up today. It takes 10 seconds at yegplus.com/Real Talk. We'll have that in the show notes, yegplus.com/Real Talk. Join YEG Plus today to start earning rewards. This weekend, it's Mother's Day, and Friesen Brothers has you covered. You know Friesen Brothers proudly in 16 different Alberta communities, and over the past 71 years, they've been putting great food on family dinner tables, making sure that quality time happens, and oftentimes making sure that you don't have to do the work yourself. Well, that includes their Mother's Day brunch. That's this weekend, May 9th and 10th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. You can find the details on their website. By the way, shout out to Friesen Brothers for the 4 p.m. brunch. I'm big on that. Savor the moment with Mom over an exquisite brunch at Friesen Brothers. It's $30 per person for all you can eat, including banana bread, French toast, mini quiche, breakfast sausage, and a whole lot more. Treat Mom to a delicious day. Join Friesen Brothers for a brunch experience she will not forget. The following offer is available at Friesen Brothers in Barhead, Drumheller, both Edmonton locations, Fort Saskatchewan, High Prairie, by the way, Fort Sask, you'll be mentioned again later in this episode, Hinton Hill, Peace River, and Stony Plain. That's the Mother's Day brunch at Friesen Brothers, May 9th and 10th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., $30 per person, all you can eat. Kubi Renewable Energy reminding you that their installation schedule is filling fast. Their installers are already making sure that solar panels are getting up on the roofs of residences, commercial buildings, agricultural applications. Everybody's recognizing the benefits of energy independence, the benefits of keeping more money in your pocket. Kubi is Western Canada's busiest solar installer, and for good reason. Nobody installs more cleanly. Nobody installs more quickly. Nobody stands behind their work like our friends at Kubi. They're powered by people, And you can get your free solar quote today by visiting kuby.ca. That's KUBY.ca. And while we're talking about power, while we're talking about utilities, you know how proud we are to partner with Park Power. They're the ones powering our live chat every single episode, your friendly local utilities provider. Save some money today by swinging on by their website and viewing their plans. Compare rates on internet, electricity, and natural gas. Now, you're probably going to pay less. I can't guarantee with everybody, but chances are you will. You will have no interruption in your service. You'll make no compromise in the quality of your service. And here's the thing, 10% of your electricity is going to go toward a nonprofit of your choice in the province of Alberta as well. You get to choose your charity when you sign up at parkpower.ca. If you want to save even more, check out parkpower.ca/realtalk for exclusive bundling benefits heard only on this show, including $150 back on your very first bill when you bundle internet, electricity, and natural gas using the promo code REALTALK. All one word. Again, that's parkpower.ca/realtalk. Park Power is your friendly, local utilities provider. Retired Deputy Chief Neil LeMay, our guest in studio in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West, a former RCMP major crimes investigator. The RCs are on this, and I know for a lot of people they go, okay, good. This is going to be investigated, and there will be accountability, and somebody will pay for what they've done in betraying these 3 million people, releasing their personal information. How optimistic are you that that will be the outcome?
No, I'm not optimistic at all.
Oof.
This is smoke and mirrors. I know that the Premier announced this during question period that the RCMP are on this. If you listen very carefully what she said in her statement, there's one 3 or 4 word line in there where she said, if somebody's harmed by this. So she's already qualifying what the RCMP can and can't do. So that's the first observation. The second one is that the provincial government has been strangling the RCMP financially. I don't know if it's part of their efforts to create the Alberta Sheriff's Police Service or municipal police services, but the funding needed by the RCMP to do an investigation like this doesn't exist. The RCMP are funded to the lowest level possible. They're the cheapest police force in Canada. They're funded to the bare minimum, and that means responding to calls on the street. Programs like major crimes, like fraud investigations, fall under the provincial policing gambit, and they're expensive now. Most of them are done online. The days of the gumshoe detective walking around, interviewing people and stuff, there's still a component of that, but it maybe makes up 10 or 15% of the investigation. Most of the investigations now are document-related, video-related, audio-related, and of course internet-related, where information is searched on the internet and chat rooms and emails, and of course cell phones. It's very expensive to get a cell phone company to pay for, or to get a cell phone company to provide the information you need. It's very time consuming. They move at glacial speeds. They don't make money. The big telephone companies don't make money giving the RCMP their information. In fact, they lose money. So it's not a high priority for the cell phone companies either.
But in your experience in law enforcement, do the circumstances around this situation create an impetus for a more fulsome commitment to it, for funding, for it to be taken more seriously, for the timeline to be accelerated when millions of people have had their data compromised, when thousands of people are outraged and expressing it, when it's really one of the more prominent political stories in the country this year? I mean, what sort of an impact would that have on law enforcement?
Well, law enforcement is pretty disciplined when it comes to starting an investigation. The first question and the most important question is, what crime has been committed? Now, to me, it's not absolutely clear that there has been a crime committed yet. I've heard the various excuses given by the Centurion Project. Some of that may be accurate. They may have unwittingly, and they may have been duped. They may not be very astute at understanding privacy implications and the law. Clearly, they thought they had a gold mine, and they weren't trying to hide it. They were advertising it. They were telling people, they were inviting the UCP caucus members to come and, hey, look what we've got. There's stories out there that say they even tried to sell it to the Americans. Is
there anything more egregious at this point in time that you can imagine that an Alberta-based group would acquire the data, the personal and sensitive data of the entire electors list and allegedly offer it to the Americans at this point in time? Can you think of anything? I mean, I don't mean to put you in dark places. Of course, we can imagine something worse. But that, in my mind, is absolutely nuts. And nobody should forget this.
Yeah, well, I spend most of my time in dark places, unfortunately. So, they're talking about, the independence movement's talking about freedoms and more financial stability for Alberta when it separates and stuff. They've taken the voters list, turned it into a target list. They've actually reduced our freedom because now we have to be more careful. We have to be on guard all the time now because our information's out there. So the time you could have spent enjoying your free time at the lake is now going to be consumed, at least when you're sitting there sipping on a beer thinking, geez, I wonder if somebody's trying to get into my bank account. A little over the top, yeah, but
also, Neil, we didn't bring this up. I mean, you invoked my name earlier and gave it a hypothetical of how this could be very inconvenient for me. Let me return the favor. What if there's somebody that's been stewing down in Bowden behind bars for the last 14 years because, former investigator Neil LeMay was the one that put the nail in their coffin and found the evidence that convicted them on a first-degree murder charge, and now they're out, and now they're looking to inflect their pound of flesh. You know what I'm saying? I mean, Has that occurred to you? I mean, Jason Kenney's address is out there. Rachel Notley's address is out there, sure. But what about judges? What about former RCMP major crimes investigators? What about everybody? Has that landed with you personally? Is that the type of thing that you would be thinking about? Yeah.
So let me give you an example. So I spent a good portion of my career working as an undercover police officer. And I'm not talking about the guy that wears the suit, the detective. I'm talking about the guy that wears the biker regalia and joins the outlaw motorcycle groups in their clubhouse and basically is the eyes and the ears for law enforcement. Of course, when you go to court as an undercover operator, you have to give your name because the rules of the court require that you state your name, Neil LeMay, I'm a member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So now they've got my name in court. So if they decide that I have been threatened in the past, and the greatest safeguard, the greatest risk mitigation tool out there is they don't know where I live. I was living in a major Canadian city at the time, and with about 4 million people in it, and it was impossible for them to find me. Mind you, these are the early days of the internet as well, so that's changed the dynamic as well. But I took some confidence, some reassurance that even though these guys were killers, they had killed other people, and 2 of them were serial killers, had killed multiple people in different locations.
Jeez.
I took some confidence in the fact that they don't know my home address. Well, now that's all changed. Police officers, I know the RCMP, I know municipal police forces were meeting on Monday. They have police officers who are in vulnerable positions now, who they're going to have to move. They're going to have to move them out of Alberta, where the voters list is, and move them to other provinces where it's safer to be a member of a police force because of what this government did or didn't do, either in changing the Elections Act or not dealing with this quickly when they found out about it. But I want to go back to the conversation we were having about what are the RCMP going to do now. So we've got a problem. We've RCMP investigate criminal matters. So on my reading on this, there may be a criminal offense here, but there also may be honest mistaken belief on their part.
Help me though, and I'm not attuned especially into election law or this sort of thing, but my understanding is that it is absolutely illegal for a political party to share that electors list with anybody. That's where this probably needs to start, right?
So
now, it's been widely reported by the Globe and Mail. People can reference that report. Carrie Tate, as part of a team, reporting that these seeded names in the list allow Elections Alberta to understand who had what list and what lists have been shared. And my understanding is that journalists have traced this back to the Republican Party of Alberta and Cam Davies.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
So that's where this needs to start. That could be illegal, correct? Sharing that list, making it available to a third party?
It's okay. So we got to differentiate between criminal law, which is the Criminal Code of Canada, a federal statute that's maintained by the Parliament in Ottawa, and the Elections Act, which is a provincial statute that's maintained by the legislature here in Alberta. The RCMP pretty much investigate criminal code matters, and they don't stray too far into elections matters unless there's evidence of a criminal offense under the criminal code. Now, this falls squarely in the bailiwick of the Elections Commissioner to investigate. He has got trained investigators. He doesn't have the resources. We've seen that in previous investigations. But that's how the government strangles their critics. They pass a law, and then they reduce the funding. When I was in government, and I spent about 10 years working for the provincial government, I watched them introduce the same $1 million 4 times in various projects. They'd introduce, we're going to spend $1 million here. 2 months into it, they'd pull back that money very quietly, not tell anybody. And then the next thing you know, they're announcing that same $1 million for another project. So they get 4 PR opportunities out of $1 million. The RCMP don't have the money to investigate this. They don't have the officers. I know the commissioner is going to be, or the deputy commissioner here in Edmonton is going to be saying, well, what's the offense? Do I drop my murder investigations? Do I drop my sexual assault investigations? I'm going to need 50 guys on this investigation to get it done in a timely manner so that those responsible are held accountable and people can make a decision at the next election whether that affects their vote. So the government, I've for years, for 44 years, I've listened to every political party out there say we have a law and order agenda. We're going to pass this law, we're going to pass this law, we're going to pass that law. Well, the reality is we have all the laws we need on the books. We've had them on there for 100 years. What we don't have is sufficient resources in 2026, in the age of the internet, in the age of artificial intelligence, to actually conduct a timely and thorough investigation. The government knows this. And whether they're doing this to make the RCMP fall on their face, I mean, they can't staff a lot of detachments. Some of their detachments are running at 50% strength. Where are the bodies coming from? They're not coming from the federal side of policing. They're coming from the provincial policing contract with the RCMP. That we may have, I don't even know what the number is anymore in Alberta, but not every police officer works on the provincial side. So this investigation belongs with the Elections Commissioner. If the Elections Commissioner finds evidence of a criminal act, then he can call the RCMP in. But for Danielle Smith to stand up and say that in the legislature suggests to me that she doesn't understand law enforcement, she doesn't understand policing, and her comments on other policing matters tells me that she really doesn't understand how a police service works in a democracy.
Retired Deputy Chief Neil LeMay, our guest in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. Jason Markusoff, who does a remarkable job with the CBC, just this week has posted a report. People can check it out, cbc.ca. It shows that Russia and the United States are amplifying Alberta separatist narratives to stoke division and distrust. People that take the time to read the report will find that a website, albertaseparatist.com, just weeks after Mark Carney won the federal election, this website popped up, accompanied by similar TikTok and YouTube accounts, similar names. Article headlines included "The Case for Sovereignty Over Statehood" and "Ottawa's Piggy Bank Wakes Up." But it's turned out, researchers have discovered that website, which has since been taken down, those social media accounts likely came from a Russian covert influence network known as Storm 1516. That makes fictional websites that target audiences in various countries around the world, in this case targeting Canada and Alberta. It goes on from there. I encourage you to read Markusoff's report. Could this data that has been leaked, could it be weaponized for political interference or voter suppression efforts? Is that something people should have very real concerns about?
I think so. If you care about democracy and the style of life we've lived in Alberta for the last 100 and some years, democracy delivered that lifestyle to us. It delivered all of the good things along with the bad. There's an old saying is the democracy is the worst form of government except for all other forms. So, the democracy's given us a good standard of living. There are the complainers that will always think they've been shortchanged in some fashion. But definitely countries like Iran, Russia, North Korea, China, they have significant...
India,
yes. India has a large force of individuals on the ground here in Canada who are working towards the goals of the Indian government in relation to the Sikhs and the Punjabi independence movement. But as well as that, there are when I worked in government, there was very clear evidence of foreign interference on sitting members of the legislature. We would receive information that there were attempts by the Chinese intelligence services to influence democratically elected MLAs through the diaspora of Chinese citizens. The same goes for Russia. I mean, they hold family members hostage in these countries if people don't do the things they want them to do here in Canada. So it's a very lucrative or a very profitable list for any country to have. We've seen cases, and there's one playing out in the courts right now, where a private security firm was duped into believing they were tracking down a fraudster and criminal from China who was living here in Canada. Turns out he wasn't a fraudster. The charges were trumped up, and he was a dissident critical of the Chinese government, and they were trying to use a private investigative firm to get him to a country where he could be kidnapped and taken back to China and sentenced to imprisonment. So these things are real. They're happening in our country. A lot of people don't see them, but for those of us that are in the risk management, security, intelligence side of things, you don't have to scratch the surface very hard to discover this sort of thing. We have to think about the wars in Iran and Ukraine. Russia and Israel want to influence how we assist or don't assist the Ukraine and places like Gaza and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of intelligence and information gathering going on that we're totally unaware of as citizens.
Man, you're dropping these big bombs here, and I'm just like, I move on to the next question. But everything that you're saying, I mean, this should be a wake-up call to everybody. And I think that this scenario has or is serving as a wake-up call. I know for me personally, and I know for this audience. I see John Carson in our live chat, powered by Park Power, former MLA. Off the top of my head, I think Edmonton West Henday. John, am I correct? John says that basically this David Parker himself, the creator of the Centurion Project, the driving force behind Take Back Alberta, says CSIS needs to investigate him to take a look into any foreign relationships. I noted that John was actually in our chat yesterday as well. And John, I grabbed this. John, if you want to put it on the screen, he says he contributed, said the participants who took part in this leak should be dragged in front of committee. This was a comment from our live stream in our most recent episode. John, I snagged it because I wanted to put it in front of the audience. He says, who did they give this data to? Who did they tell about the link? In particular, if there was an effort to get this into the hands of organizations outside of Canada, this should be a serious offense in undermining our democracy. He says, either way, it should be considered an attempt to undermine our privacy. Doxing needs to be evaluated seriously under the criminal code or otherwise. Neil, you're nodding. You started nodding the minute that I used the word doxing. Right. That's becoming more of a reality. It's being weaponized. It wasn't even, for all intents and purposes, it really wasn't possible 15 or 20 years ago. Right. But the advent of new technology and information sharing and social media and the like has turned doxing, releasing somebody's personal information, and oftentimes sicking an army of critics or activists upon them, a real weapon, a real force, a real concern.
Doxing and its close cousin swatting. So
not familiar with that.
Okay, so swatting is where you say an individual has a beef, and they're mad at an MLA or they're mad at a judge or whatever the case may be. So swatting is you spoof that person's phone number, you call 911, and you say there's a hostage incident occurring at the judge's house or at the MLA's house. Well, Edmonton Police Service, well, any police service, they're going to roll out en masse with their armored vehicles, their emergency response SWAT teams, hence swatting. They're going to surround that house. They're going to point guns at people. It's extremely traumatizing. You have no idea what's going on. It's become a political weapon to swat your opponents. And there's lots of operatives, and I can name them. I know who they are.
Please do.
Well, this forum is probably not the place to do that. Maybe in a parliament or a legislative committee, there's some protection there. But I think Mr. Wallace is probably the self-proclaimed political.
You're talking about David Wallace.
David Wallace,
He's
yes.
the podcaster connected to James DeFiore. They're the ones do I say allegedly involved? Nobody loves suing more than these guys.
Exactly.
So I'm just going to pick my words carefully. But,
As I am.
But Wallace and DeFiore are the ones that had their cell phones seized by, I believe it was RCMP or at least a municipal police force in connection to investigations around Athana Mentzelopoulos. If you guys remember, former AHS CEO was on our show in an exclusive. Make sure you check that episode out. I think that was back in January, right near the beginning of the year. And she references them in particular and takes us in giving us exclusive insights into their attempted intimidation campaign. The guy describes himself as a political fixer. Carry on. Wanted to provide some context for the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you don't have to dig very far. All you have to do is watch the man's podcast to realize that he's out there operating in an area where most people would find totally disgusting.
He boasts about it.
He boasts about the dirty tricks he's used. Now, we have a premier in this province who, in question period, I'm told, used direct quotes from this man. So, again, we've got a political party in Alberta that is sending caucus members to David Parker's training sessions on this new super app that he's had developed. We've got a premier who was, when she was in the, I believe, Wild Rose Party, was an ardent separatist firewall person. And now, somehow, the lines of communication, I don't know if she read it. I don't know if she watched his podcast. I mean, she certainly could have come by it in some other fashion. But for her to quote, unless she didn't know it was him, to quote some of the things to intimidate, I believe it was Mr. Guthrie and his wife.
Pete Guthrie.
Yeah, and other comments about prescriptions and what people are eating. And
You're
what
talking
people are
about Carrie
drinking.
Tate.
Yeah,
Carrie Tate, the Globe Mail reporter, who, by the way, just won a National Journalism Award in part for the harassment and the intimidation that she has endured and stared down, let me say. Let's give Carrie some credit here, relating to her courageous reporting on what's being described as the corrupt care scandal. But you're right, she was being surveilled, and there was public information. One of the more ominous notes, I believe, was Carrie Tate, your prescription is ready for pickup, letting her know that they had been following her and surveilling her as she had visited a pharmacy and met for coffee or lunch with someone connected to a political party as well.
Yeah, so that's all out in the public
This
domain.
is real life stuff, man. This is people following people around, photographing them, attempting to intimidate them. This is dirty.
And I don't understand why the Minister of Public Safety, Mike Ellis, the Honorable Mike Ellis, he's reading about this. His ministry is reading about these so-called private investigators who have a code of conduct, who are controlled by the government through the issuance of private investigators' licenses. Why isn't he inquiring into finding out who these guys were, who they worked for? My basic research, open source intelligence on the internet, connects them to some other very unethical players. It connects them to specific companies that are licensed with business license under the Security Services and Investigators Act. Come on, Mike, get with the program here. You gotta maintain the integrity of the private investigative industry. You can't have them running around acting as goons for political fixers.
Jeez. I'm taking a look here at TroyMedia.com back in earlier this year. Doug Furby, who's one of their contributing writers, put a piece out. Dirty political dealings now routine in Alberta. The subheadline: recent events in Alberta point to a political culture that increasingly tolerates bad behavior. His lead, the opening statement: is there any other province in Canada that plays dirtier political games than Alberta? I don't know if anyone has tried to measure it, writes Doug Furby, but I would bet that Alberta is in a class of its own. He goes on to talk about Carrie Tate being harassed and the like. He references who you've just referenced, the podcasters and the like. I mean, this is really chilling stuff. This is unnerving stuff. This is, when you look at the rot here, at the core here, I would imagine that a lot of people are either going to want to ignore this. Some of us, when we find a lump in our breast or our testicle, we ignore it and hope it'll go away for a while. Others of us immediately go for a mammogram or go see our doctor, go to get tested. I'm going to ask you on two fronts here. Before we get to what the average citizen can and needs to do right now in light of this, keep in mind, none of you, if you're living in the province of Alberta, none of you have the luxury of having had your personal information spared from that leak. Everybody on the electors list, every eligible voter, has had their information leaked. That's more than 2.9 million Albertans. But I want to ask you first, if you were advising the provincial government today, you gave us a bit of a hint on what you might say to Minister Ellis. But what are three immediate steps that you would insist on to contain the damage and to begin or attempt to restore public trust?
Well, again, closing the barn door now is impossible. The horse is out there. But I think I read the other day that we can put up some fences. We can do some things to start mitigating the potential for damage to individuals. So, number one, Mike Ellis needs to start taking his role more seriously. So Mike is the public safety minister. The number one priority for any government in a Western democracy is the safety and security of the population. That trumps everything. That is there on the list of what governments should do. That is number one. That is how a democracy works, safety and security. It comes before financial increases and tax cuts and everything else. This government doesn't get that because they're ideological based, and they don't understand that there are threats that come about when you're in that sort of let's trash Canada and let's move on to working as an independent country. That's really shiny and attractive to a lot of people who are, grievance oriented. But anybody that's thought about this for 2 minutes realizes that it's ridiculous. Now, what the government has to do is they have to call a public inquiry. Premier Smith says you can't run a public inquiry at the same time as a as a police investigation. Sorry, that's nonsense. Again, she doesn't understand law enforcement. She doesn't understand the law. Political inquiries have gone on during police investigations dozens of times in my tenure as a police investigator. That's number one. Number two, she needs to give the elections commissioner an incredible increase in budget and an incredible increase in authority. She has to stop neutering him, muzzling him, and underfunding him. Number two, the government should be paying for all of those people who now have to move to ensure their safety, whether it's out of the province, whether it's to another city, whatever the case may be. Battered women comes to the top of the list, right off the top. These people, they don't have the resources to look after themselves. They're at the mercy of somebody who the courts are trying to control with a paper document. We all know that doesn't work. In fact, it's usually the immediate precursor of an attempt on their life.
You're talking about like a restraining order.
A restraining order, yeah, that sort of thing.
One of the I want to let this audience know, by the way, you let us know that you got some time, and so I'm appreciating the depth of this conversation. The very first trial that I ever covered as a young reporter in Red Deer was an absolutely horrific story. It was a nasty divorce and then a custody battle over a beautiful young boy, and you may know the family. And
I was there.
You were there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking
When the child was being handed over at the end of the weekend, right? And the mom was, you look like you're getting maybe a tiny bit emotional. I don't know.
I was there. I was at the scene.
Okay.
Yeah.
this beautiful little boy, right? The mom knew that that her husband was unhinged, and she knew that his threats of violence were serious, and so she had her girlfriend come with her. As the child was being handed back, what did the father do? He showed up, he handed the boy over, he pulled out a shotgun, and he ended it for everybody.
Right.
These are the types of things that are very real, that do happen, that happen in the province of Alberta, and that could happen again as a result of this. And the reason why I say that, and I think of that family, the Fekete family, and I think of the people, the many people that were affected there, and I think of the adult children testifying in court and how impossibly difficult that must have been for them. The people that leaked this data and that leaked this information and this is not sensational to say, could very well have blood on their hands. They could have set the table for homicide. And that is one of the many reasons why, frankly, I am so pissed off and so troubled about this, and why many, many other people are as well.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so I was in Red Deer when that occurred. I was the watch commander at the city detachment at the time. But so here in Edmonton, we have several organized crime groups, all of which have murdered people in the name of the group already. We have the Bishnoi gang, we have the Brothers Keeper gang, we have multiple outlaw motorcycle gangs and wannabe gangs. We have several ethnic organized crime groups that are operating here, and we've had hits. We've had people gunned down in their driveways. I can think of one notorious landlord here that was gunned down a few years ago. His name just escapes me now, but he walked out of his house into his driveway in southwest Edmonton, I believe, and he was met with a hail of bullets, killed him. So these are not maybes and, this could be. These things happen in our city. These things occur frequently.
Also, Neil, you and I both know that there's no way that the government is ponying up to pay the moving costs for people who've been impacted by this. Realistically, there's no way the government agrees to do that. I appreciate you putting it on the table as something the government must do, but you and I both know there's not a chance. They'll suggest that that's subjective. They'll suggest there needs to be proof. But I'll tell you this, and you know it more than I do. And unfortunately, in our live chat here, there are survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault that are bravely sharing their own stories in our live chat. I see you. I hear you. I appreciate that. They're saying right now this is an immediate challenge for these people. The second that their addresses have been released, they're on the move. They got to go. And in many circumstances, these could be moms with young children that have just settled, that have just found some form of safety and peace of mind. Not permanent, but some form, and that's now been compromised, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And compromised for, well, some would say political gain, the independence movement, but there's a strong undercurrent of personal profiteering in that independence movement. I won't name names, but there are individuals who stand to make a great deal of money if this comes to fruition. I think there's
Why won't you name names?
Because it complicates the main message.
I feel like people need to know who to look out for. Where are the snakes in the grass? That's what people need to know.
Well, there are several investigative journalists that are working on this who are probably better able to tell that story than I am. And hopefully they have the resources to do that. But back to your comment about battered and domestically abused women, there's lots of very capable lawyers in Edmonton who will make sure the government pays when they have to move. I mean, if the courts have already said that person is on a no contact order and he's not to come within 200 yards of his former wife and his children or their residence, it's a pretty much made out case that they're at risk by this list, and it won't take much of a court case for the government to be ordered to pay up. Now the government doesn't have any money except our money, so we're going to pay for this again. So this is going to come out of our tax dollars to move all of these vulnerable people, and there are hundreds of them. The RCMP is going to have to move people. Edmonton Police is going to have to move people. They're going to have to pay for those out of their budgets. That money won't be used to investigate crimes, murders, robberies, kidnappings. They're going to have to sell people's houses and move them to other provinces to ensure their safety. That's coming out of our tax dollars.
We're talking about a huge disruption to people's personal lives as well, right?
We're talking
Like, let's not pretend, or let's not. I'm not saying you are, but like, let's not for a second convince ourselves that you can just move people to other provinces and their problems are solved. These are people's lives we're talking about.
They are, and there's family problems. Like if these people have to literally go into hiding, aka the witness protection program, that's extraordinarily expensive. We're talking millions of dollars per person. So, I mean, you have to change records. You have to change SIN numbers. You have to change birth records. It's a huge endeavor. And the province just seems to say, look, there's nothing to see here. It's a phone book. It's just like a phone book. We're going to have the RCMP investigate. That's the wrong agency. That's the wrong agency. Until the elections commissioner comes back and says, we found evidence of a fraud, or somebody phones in and says, look, I had my bank account drained. They've destroyed my credit score, and the bank is repossessing my house because somebody assumed my identity. Well, now the RCMP and the Municipal Police Service, they have a crime. But at this point in time, I'm not sure we have a crime yet. I'm not sure we have a criminal offense. We certainly have a violation of the Elections Act, but that's not automatically a criminal offense. Criminal offenses, criminal code, Election Act offenses, Elections Act. So we need to understand that separation and how political or government is using that to gaslight the population into thinking something's being done. Nothing's being done. I worked in government for years, provincial government, and I know how they think. Stall, stall, stall. Witnesses will die. They will move away. They will lose interest. And 3 years from now, when we hold a public inquiry, the entire population will have forgotten about this, and we'll skate on this like nothing happened.
Well, look how many people this week are talking about alleged gerrymandering. Like zero.
Zero.
Right?
Zero.
That was all we were talking about last week. And what were we talking about 2 weeks ago? I guess pulling down flags in schools and the like, Bill 25, teachers removing politics and ideology out of classrooms. Public attention moves on quickly.
Very quickly.
And that's not an indictment of the public or of talk shows, of course, Neil. We do our best to keep up, but that flood the zone strategy, Steve Bannon talks about this a lot.
Yes.
And we've seen it at play in Alberta and other jurisdictions. It's very effective, like it or not.
So I saw something yesterday that stopped me cold in my tracks. So I was driving by a local TV station here in Edmonton, and I just happened to be out front, and there was red paint splattered all over the sidewalk and on the grass, and the front doors of the media station were smashed out. So if you've ever, I would recommend everybody read a book called On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder, who's an American historian, but he writes an outstanding book about authoritarianism in the context of the Western world as we're living now. So I'm
showing it right now on my screen, timothysnyder.org, if people want to check it out.
Yeah, there it is. That's the one. 20 lessons. Look, it's a short read. You can read it in 15 minutes. It's 120 some pages. It's got...
Did you say 15 minutes?
Yeah. 15,
you read 120 pages in 15 minutes?
I only read the important stuff.
Is this some insight into what major crimes investigators need to be capable of?
Well, you have to move fast.
That would take me 2 trips to Mexico, but carry on.
Oh, my goodness.
Carry on.
Would not. You could read that when you went to bed.
Okay.
But Timothy Snyder he's been researching politics, and he's a historian, not a political scientist, and he has picked out some beauties. So one of the things they talk about is the attacks on the truth finders, the media. The media finds the truth. The police, not so much. They find evidence. But the media finds the truth. And they're probably one of the most important institutions in a democracy. So we have journalists under attack. So when I saw smashed out windows and I saw red paint, it told me two things. Whoever smashed out those windows wasn't somebody just wandering by with a hammer. They did enough planning and preparation to bring paint with them. Now, the second thing that jumped out at me is no other buildings on that block were targeted. I didn't do a real good search. There may have been some other vandalism. Then I found out later that another media station had been, the same thing had happened, several miles away. So being sort of a risk manager and intelligence guy, I said, this is not a coincidence. This is not some homeless person who's having some sort of psychotic break and is going around smashing windows. This is targeted. This is somebody sending a message to journalists, just like they're sending that message to Carrie Tate. This is a form of harassment and intimidation. And I think there's more to come. I think we're on the cusp here of things deteriorating more than they've deteriorated in the last few years since this separatist movement has become at the center. So the average person wouldn't note this, but to me it was a huge red flag. And that's why I've been retired from the RCMP for 20 some years, and I haven't really done much in the way of advocating for public safety and security and stuff. But what I'm seeing here, frankly, scares the hell out of me. We are sliding down a slippery slope greased by government people who are aligned with the independence movement, who are changing laws to make their life easier, to moving towards a separation and independence. They don't have a plan for after independence. To be quite honest with you, I don't think they have the cognitive ability to understand where they're taking this province. I'm sorry. I know some of these players.
Don't apologize.
I'm sorry, but some of these people just do not have the wherewithal to get us to what they call freedom and independence. They will sell us out in a heartbeat if it's in their interest. That's my take.
You know, we had a meeting with our golf tournament organizers yesterday, right? The Real Talk Golf Classic coming up Thursday, June 18th at the Ranch Golf and Country Club. You can register your foursome today, RyanJespersen.com, click on events. And our tournament organizers came in here and they were joking. They were grinding my gears, but they were wondering why they had to wait behind door number 1 to have the fob unlock it. And then they were wondering why they had to wait to receive the code to punch in to door number 2, which has a different lock than door number 1. And then why they had to wait at door number 3, where I then went and greeted them and unlocked door number 3. They looked up, they saw the camera in the common area. They see the cameras in the studio. This is exactly why, Neil.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is exactly why.
So just to add to that, quite coincidentally, maybe, I don't believe in coincidences, so I shouldn't say that, but I was talking to, I do a lot of work with other security companies. I'm a consultant, but I will refer the companies that I work for to camera providers, to physical security guards, you know, depending on what their situation is. So I was talking to one of my camera providers, and he said, security camera sales have taken off like a rocket. He said he's selling more cameras now to people who never thought they needed a camera or a security system because they were anonymous. Nobody knew their address. Nobody knew where they lived. They might have their name maybe, but security sales, if you're in that business right now, you're experiencing a boom apparently in people wanting surveillance systems, people wanting alarms, people wanting cameras.
Who could blame people?
Well, you can't. And you never know where the threat's going to come from.
Neil, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your availability here. Plain Powers just said, what an excellent guest today. By the way, Jim in our live chat, powered by Park Power, says this story is miles deep. Dwayne says, I remember what happened to Shannon Phillips. I mean, Shannon Phillips, former cabinet minister under Rachel Notley, essentially was law enforcement itself. That Lethbridge Police Service has been, maybe I can ask you that. I don't know. That police service was a real mess for a long time.
Well, they're not alone.
Yeah. They're not alone. Hey, can you hang out? Can we fit in another mention? You told me you could stick around.
Sure.
Can we tell? I'm going to tell somebody a story that hopefully is going to make you proud to be from Alberta. And then more. You want to jump into our live chat, answer some questions that audience members may have?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Neil LeMay is a retired deputy chief of the Alberta Sheriff's Service. I'm going to ask you about the Alberta Police, by the way. Let's dig in. As long as we're into this, let's get into this. Neil, also a longtime major crimes investigator with the RCMP. If you're just joining our live stream presented by California Closets, he's now a global security consultant. I think you can understand. He's got a pretty good command of what's happening here. If you're watching this live, you can send us your questions. If you're watching this later or listening, anywhere you get your podcasts, leave us a comment. You can do so on Spotify, or you can always send us an email to talk@ryanjespersen.com. Let's take a look at a good news story for a second, everybody. Every Thursday, courtesy of our friends at Play Alberta, we focus on on an Alberta Win. This is an Alberta individual or an organization that's making a huge impact in the world around them. We had multiple submissions on this story. So a shout out to David and Jim and Kyle and everybody else that wrote in to talk at ryanjespersen.com. This one here, though, Evelyn, we're going to read your email. We love this one about Canadian astronaut Joshua Kutryk. Evelyn writes in and says, Jespo, this one feels really special. Alberta's own Josh Kutryk, born and raised in Fort Saskatchewan. Check out his Instagram here. This has been shared by Astro Kutryk and the Canadian Space Agency. Born and raised in Fort Sask, is headed to the International Space Station. Evelyn says, let that sink in for a second. A kid from rural Alberta growing up on a cattle farm is about to spend 6 months orbiting Earth, conducting cutting-edge science and representing Canada on the world stage. Kutryk has been grinding for his entire life as a fighter pilot, as a test pilot, as an engineer, more than 4,000 flight hours across 40 different aircraft, and now he has been tapped for NASA's Crew 13 mission, which is launching no earlier than September of 2026. Josh is going to be the first Canadian astronaut to fly under NASA's Commercial Crew program and part of a team doing research that could shape everything from human health to future missions to the moon. Now, this wasn't just a personal milestone, of course. This is a reminder that Alberta doesn't just produce energy. We produce explorers and innovators and world-class talent, from Cold Lake test flights to orbiting 400 kilometers above the planet. Evelyn says, talk about Alberta range. I love that, Evelyn. What a cool way to put it. She says, so yeah, politics can be messy. And of course, she says, you know that headlines can be heavy. I mean, case in point, today's show, right? But Evelyn says, this is without a doubt an Alberta win. And we agree, Evelyn, and everybody else who emailed in sharing their excitement around what this incredible innovator and achiever Josh Kutryk is about to do, proudly representing his home province of Alberta and his home country of Canada. Alberta Wins are proudly presented by Play Alberta, and Alberta wins all the time, with all revenue staying in Alberta, and that makes all the difference, friends. Play Alberta is the only app in the province that puts all revenue directly back into supporting programs and services that Albertans rely on every day. So whether you play, bet, or buy with casino, sports, or lottery, know that your fun also helps make a difference across the province. You can visit playalberta.ca/realtalk to learn more. That's playalberta.ca/realtalk. You've got to be 18 or over to play. If you gamble, use your game sense and send us your Alberta win, like Evelyn and everybody else did this week, to talk at ryanjespersen.com. Neil LeMay joining us in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West, longtime RCMP investigator, major crimes investigator, and of course giving us insights here into the, I would say, probably the top political story of the week here across the country, which is saying something. And Real Talkers have been sharing their personal stories and their personal thoughts here, Neil, in our live chat powered by Park Power. I love this one from Big Jim. Jim, appreciate $10 in the super chat. The significance of that, Neil, is that for every $5 in our YouTube super chat, they've bought the feature guest a cold beer, which you can either crack as soon as we're done. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you can crack it now, or you can take it with you. But so Big Jim's bought you a couple cold ones here, and he says, an amazing guest today. He says, I'm learning so much from this lifelong, earnest public servant. So there you go. I hope that resonates with you. And that's a pretty cool way to put it, Jim. I agree. An earnest public servant. We need more people speaking out courageously, like Neil is on this morning's show. Super Chat Ken buying you another beer. As a matter of fact, he's specified he would like it to be a special coffee. So he's going to cover a shot of Mini Yeg's Hanson Distillery cream liqueur for your next coffee. He says people with principles make for the best guests. He says it provides a small hope for the rest of us. And then Les is wondering, and we'll kind of circle back on this question. He wonders, is it illegal to sell the voter list or to supply it to a foreign adversary? You had clarified the difference between like a criminal offense and an elections Alberta law, but maybe you could circle back on that answer for Les, who's just bought you a cold beer to hear your answer.
So the definitive answer is maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe. So this again circles back to what we talked about, where, you've got to start with the information, gather some initial information, assess it as you go along. I think we're past the frivolous stage, so we don't have to worry about that. But this is something police services in Alberta do very well. Now, I'm a pretty vocal critic of every police service, the RCMP, CPS, and EPS here in Alberta, and every police chief knows me, and the deputy commissioner at K Division knows me, and the RCMP as well. But they do a lot of things very well. They do some things that probably don't help them with the level of support people give them. But one of them is they do have some very talented investigators, and they've trained people. There's a college in Ottawa called the Canadian Police College, where you actually go to learn how to be a detective. It's not something that's really taught on the job. It's a very intense course, or a group of courses actually, where you go and you learn how to interview at the detective level. You learn how to manage a major case. You learn the things, you learn the law, you learn all those important things. So the police will look at this. They'll look for a crime, but the victim in this is 2.9 million people. But again, I don't know what evidence the collection commissioner has. I don't know what evidence the government has turned over, if anything. My suspicion is that the government will not be that forthcoming with a police investigation. So I think that maybe is probably as far as I can go until this thing plays out. And I said this before in another interview I did earlier this week, but I expect to see this list or portions of it or individuals off of it for sale on the dark web. So that's something that the government has got to start monitoring. That's not something for the police to do. That's not something for the elections commissioner to do. That's something for the government's own intelligence group. They do have one, as a matter of fact, because I used to be in charge of it.
Government intelligence.
Oh,
Interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, it's not as nefarious
Some
as it
people
sounds.
might suggest that that's an oxymoron.
Yeah.
I had to take my shot. It was right there on a silver platter.
This is the public service, and I have a lot of respect for the public service. These people work in impossible conditions. But back to what I was saying. So somebody's got to start monitoring what's on the dark web. Now, that's huge. That's a huge thing to do, because the dark web makes the accessible web look like a flea on the back of a dog. It's the dark web where all the really crazy stuff is happening. So the government's got to start monitoring that. They've got to start looking after the Albertans on that list.
Just so I'm clear, this would be at arm's length from the politicians, correct?
Oh,
like does any
nothing in government is at arm's length from politicians, and I learned that.
Well, this is why nobody wants an Alberta pension plan. This is why nobody trusts a lot of the things this government's up to. But Neil, you've just respectfully spent more than the past hour. We sure appreciate your time talking about how the Justice Minister has dropped the ball, how the Minister of Public Safety has dropped the ball, how the Premier has dropped the ball. How on earth is anybody going to believe that this government will make a meaningful and long-lasting commitment to monitoring whether or not the electors list is for sale on the dark web, when, if anything, all it would do, in other words, disclosure around this or confirmation that that's happening, would make that exact government look worse? There's no way that they're going to do it.
So what I learned when I was working in government is, and partly the RCMP too, because they are very reputation conscious. They've bought into this whole Hollywood thing of the RCMP, and they like to bolster that. So anything that makes the government or police services look bad gets hidden away, and there's several ways they do it. It gets pushed under the rug. None of those agencies are transparent. RCMP can't be as transparent as government could. But government always looks for ways to hide things. If anybody's had any experience with the new Access to Information Act in Alberta, you'll realize that the only reason that was amended was to make it harder to get the information you're looking for. But that's a whole nother topic. So what we've got in government is everything that comes across their desk is viewed through the prism of, does this get me votes? Does this cost me votes? Period. That's the calculus. That's the analysis. Doesn't matter how many people are going to lose their houses in a flood. Doesn't matter what disaster is occurring, whatever. They only want to conduct the government in such a way that they get votes. Now, that's one of the bad parts of being in a democracy.
And that's unfortunately a reality in almost every jurisdiction
every
as well.
Western country.
That's not limited to Alberta.
But you need to understand that that's how the government looks at this. Now, gaslighting we used to call it spin. When I was much younger and I took my public relations course in Ottawa, it was spin. How do you make a bad story look good? How do you make a bad story look less bad? So they have entire offices of spin people and people who basically what they produce gaslights Alberta. The Premier standing up and saying the RCMP are going to investigate that. Well, by the time that investigation comes out, I will be probably 71 years old.
You're saying that's 6 years from now?
Yeah, pretty close, probably. Look at the last investigations into elections shenanigans.
You're talking about the UCP leadership race?
Yeah, exactly. Years, stalled investigations.
And diddly squat, by the way, by the end of it.
Diddly squat. Nobody cared on the public side, but diddly squat. Well, that's what the government's aiming for, is to reduce the bad press and increase the good press. Everybody out there says, oh, great, the RCMP are investigating, they're going to get to the bottom of this. I don't think so. I don't think they're not going to get to the bottom of anything. And most of the evidence that the police collect never sees the light of day. Even if it goes to trial, there are boxes and boxes of evidence that have an impact on the accountability of government, but have no impact on a criminal trial, on a criminal charge. That's why we need a public inquiry, because all of that becomes relevant. And we need a political inquiry with the power to subpoena witnesses, to administer oaths, and to collect documents. Otherwise, you're spinning your wheels.
Does the name Neola Chorus resonate with you? I want to read this comment to you from our live chat here. She says, Neil is a stellar guest. He came to my rescue when I worked at Alberta Justice and I was threatened by the Freemen.
Right.
I'm going to ask you about that if you're willing to talk about that, because sure. I think that this is another example of what can happen when data is leaked. And I did not know that Neola, who I know personally, she's appeared on the show, very, very sharp lady, incredible insights. I really appreciate her. I did not know that she had been impacted by this, but I will also say where we live, and I'll keep the information and details vague because I'm not trying to invite any more heat on myself, but in our neighborhood, relatively close to our home, somebody associated with the Crown Prosecutor's Service also was forced to leave their home, not for the day, not for the week. They had to sell their house and move because they had been doxxed and their personal information had been leaked related to the Freemen, who are basically kind of like squatters, right? Like you can explain to us what they're all about, but basically this person associated with the Crown, they were a Crown Prosecutor. They had to move. They had to move their whole life because they were being harassed, threatened, and were very, afraid of, I think, what were very credible threats against their lives. So I know this to be true. Can you give us some insights into that?
Sure. So I'll have to keep this generic, of course. So when I was with the government in the Sheriff's Branch, I ran several investigative units and protection units. Protection units are the ones who walk around the legislature in sheriff's uniforms. They're armed. They protect the MLAs, the officers of the legislature, and basically the whole campus around the legislature there. About 5,500 employees in that area. Of course, the legislature is a magnet for protests. It's also a magnet for those that are unhinged, perhaps, are a lot of people who have a grievance and they've been through every possible mechanism to have their grievance resolved, the courts, the ombudsmen, et cetera,
workers' compensation. They show up at the legislature as an issue of last resort. We'll remind people there have been shootings at the legislature.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. The bullet holes are still there. If you go to the legislature, ask the sheriff at the front desk to see the bullet holes, and he'll point you to where the bullet holes are at the front desk at the legislature. And we've had murders in the legislature. 1976, there was a domestic violence case where a young lady was working for the Minister of Community and Culture at the time. I'm not sure that's the name it was. Had a rocky relationship with a boyfriend who was obsessed with her. And he took a gun, walked down there, and he killed her on the 3rd floor of the legislature. 1976, 1977, somewhere in there. So that's no stranger. But MLAs now, as a result of that, they're protected by gun-toting sheriffs who carry carbines, who carry sidearms.
As they should.
Yeah, but the rest of us don't have that level of protection. So I'll just make that point. But threats against politicians are continuous. We're not talking about 1 or 2 a year. We're talking about 1 or 2 a week. Alison Redford had a lot of serious threats that against her. And that was my time in the legislature, a short period of time with Premier Stelmach as well. So we've moved social workers who have been threatened with death because of the work they did in social welfare, in looking after child and family services. We've moved staff around so that they can't be found at their place of work because of domestic violence issues. So these are real things. And, if there are a lot of people out there who don't have the self-control, or they're basically psychopathic, who don't care who they kill. I mean, that's the people I've investigated for years. The Edmonton Max up on the hill northeast of the city is full of psychopaths. So these people are out there. About 3% of the population, 2 or 3%, falls into that group. Not all of them are criminal, but those that are walking around amongst us. There are murderers walking around free amongst us. One of the things I learned when I was doing undercover work is over and over I was told when I was sitting there drinking beer with killers, is they would tell me, yeah, the first one's difficult. The first killing's difficult and it weighs on you. But after that, it's a piece of cake. You can kill and have no remorse. So,
once you've crossed the bridge.
Once you've crossed that bridge, you kill 1, you kill 10. What's the difference?
We're talking to Neil LeMay. This is one of my favorite interviews I think I've ever done, Neil. I appreciate you being here and hanging out into overtime. Les is wondering, are we going to have to move all of our judges? Chantilly Lace says, I'm going to absolutely lose my shit. Says Alberta is in the pit of hell right now. It feels like with no recourse. Brad, who's watching us, our live stream presented by California Closets on Facebook. What's up, Facebook audience? Says, how about a class action lawsuit against the government for people at risk? This government negligence has created this situation. What about a class action lawsuit against David Parker? That's Jespo, by the way, not Brad. Aaron says this is pure evil. Others, I'm just going to read a bunch of these, Neil, because this audience is chiming in. Like a whole bunch of them have been hanging out with us all morning. Ochis says, this is bigger than we could possibly imagine. Big Jim reiterating, now is the time to enable 2-factor authentication on all of your accounts, Real Talkers. James says, David Parker has absolutely no idea the shitstorm that he has created. He needs to be arrested and charged. Others are pointing out, keep in mind, David Parker's name and address would have been released. Smith's name. Watch Parker, that greaseball, probably redacted his own information before he sent it out. Ingrid says this is so important. A public inquiry is essential. We need to pressure government and demand one now. Others are pointing out, by the way, that book that you recommended said that there's a graphic version of it, which is really neat. They said that the illustrations are really interesting as well. That was On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. So anyway, the minute you mentioned it, our live chat lit up with people. I guess a whole bunch of folks have read it already or said that this should be required reading. 20 lessons from the 20th century, that is. You're getting credit from Dubious for being a speed reader. Tracy D says, Tracy D got a bit of a chill. She said, oh my gosh, that book is literally on my table right now as we speak, which is great. Ken K says, all separatists are encouraged to self-separate immediately. Says, go ahead and head on to Oklahoma or another have-not state where the politics is more to your liking. Super Chat Ken says it's wild to see Premier Smith with a Don't Tread on Me sign in the background of her podcast to put an ideology ban in place as if she could objectively decide what constitutes an ideology. Jessica says she read that book. She says it's terrifying. She says it's a short read and everybody should take it in. Goramu just says, what an amazing guest, reminding everybody to like the episode. Thank you. Many of you are committing to share this episode, which I appreciate. Some of you are wondering, how in the hell are we going to put a short together? We do a 60 to 90 second. I don't know how I'm going to pick 90 seconds from what you've offered us today, Neil, but I sure appreciate it. This feels to me, sometimes we just tell the public, you got to listen to the whole episode. And this is one of those, because I think there's been, you've been on fire today. And I think that you've made a lot of very important points. Tracy says, I hate watching us piss away all the good that we worked decades to establish in just a few years. Noob, thanks for your YouTube channel membership, Noob, says, I'm so grateful for Neil sharing accurate, informed, and experienced information in a calm and clear manner. This has been extremely insightful. Others are, saying, Dubious says we need to go big and go public with all of the stories that people will have coming up on being found and being harassed. Dubious, I totally agree with you. Yeah, Tara says, I don't know how you're going to make a short today. I agree. 80s Fanify says, this is why I don't trust people who claim to study history but are blind to what's happening here in Alberta right now. What resonates with you on what you just heard?
Well,
all of it.
One of the reasons when you called, I agreed to come on the show is that I think most of the reporting that I've seen so far, and I don't mean this as a criticism of the media, it's just the way the newsroom works, has been the 20-second soundbite that doesn't really dig down, and there hasn't been really an explainer why this is so bad. And that's kind of what I wanted to do, is just to share my experiences and to maybe help people understand a little better about what this is, why it's so serious, how the government has enabled this to happen for all the wrong reasons, and what we need to do. But I want to make one more comment about the class action suit. Now, I understand that there is talk of a class action suit, and there may be a couple already working on it, but let's remember where the government's going to get that money to pay the class action suit. It's coming out of my pocket, your pocket, and Ryan's pocket. So it's not like the government has Danielle Smith is going and David Parker are personally going to pay those suits. Now, I'm all for lawsuits. If people are threatened, if they have to move, I'm all for them suing the government and the Centurion Project and everybody else that's involved, but we don't know who's involved. We haven't had a public inquiry, so that's going to put a damper on that. So that's sort of where I'm coming from, is that the government needs to stand up and say, okay, we screwed up. Now we're going to start fixing it. Now we're going to come clean. We're going to stop gaslighting the public. We're going to stop trying to spin this. We're going to sit down and we're going to open the books, because that's what transparent government's about. That's what we vote for. We don't vote for hidden agendas. And we didn't vote for separatism. And clearly there is, at the very least, a sympathy within the current government towards the separatist movement. I mean, they've changed the Referendum Act. They've done so many things. When you put them together, it's hard not to come to that conclusion. But on that point, you wanted to talk about the Alberta Sheriff's Police Service and where we're going. So there's a topic that's near and dear to my heart, being a former police officer here in Alberta. So just as background, so the RCMP have the Provincial Policing Services contract. They're Alberta's provincial police. They also have contracts with municipalities that contract their service to provide police services. So now we've got this grand experiment occurring in Grand Prairie, where we've got the new Grand Prairie Police Service that's missed its deadlines, that from what I'm told by various people involved, is teetering on the brink of collapse, and that if it wasn't for the support of the RCMP, they would virtually be a non-police force. They don't have the training, they don't have the senior officers, they don't have historical knowledge. The backbone of the RCMP is 150 years old. The administrative and operational backbone of the RCMP has seen it all. The institutional knowledge is huge. And as a matter of fact, I've worked with American police forces, and they are in envy of the way the RCMP works in Canada. They cannot believe that we've created such an effective police force that now some are trying to destroy. Case in point, fellow phones up and says, I'm going to kill the premier, and I've got a bomb placed. So I'm coming out to get you. So we do some basic inquiries, little investigative work, call the Mounties. Mounties say, yeah, we'll look after it. That investigator picks up the phone and phones Newfoundland, phones the RCMP detachment in Newfoundland is, hey boys, this guy's threatening somebody out here. Go pick him up and ask him what the hell's going on. Boom. 20 minutes, the guy's in custody in Newfoundland and he's being interviewed by the RCMP.
Are you sharing a real story here?
This is a real story. This is a real story. Yeah,
Okay.
This is not a hypothetical. This is a real story. In the United States.
Who was the premier at the time? Can you say?
It was Alison Redford.
Okay.
Yeah, and premiers get a lot of threats. Oh my God.
So there's nothing unusual about a death threat aimed at an Alberta?
Oh no, premiers, somebody's always threatening them.
Oh, you're almost acting like this is just a totally par for the course type scenario.
That was my job. I mean,
Wow.
we had an executive protection unit, or there still is, that looks after the premier, the lieutenant governor, and certain other politicians or government members as required. Excuse me. And then we have an intelligence service, an information service. So the difference between information and intelligence is information you gather, intelligence is the end product. When you work it through the analysis and connect it to various other things, intelligence gives you the picture. Information is raw. Oh, sorry. So in the United States, that could not happen. You would have to go through multiple layers of bureaucracy, taking days and weeks to get that person scooped up and interviewed and determine the threat. Somebody is making threatening phone calls, one province to another. Phone up the RCMP, the detachment investigator, the investigator with 2 years experience perhaps, phones up North Battleford detachment. Hey, this guy's making threats, go talk to him. I mean, that is so super efficient. The Americans actually come to the Canadian Police College in Ottawa. And when I was there, they come from all over the world to the Canadian Police College to learn how the RCMP does things. I've had roommates from Hong Kong, from Thailand when I was there. And the last time I was there, it was full of Americans. I laugh because there was even police officers from the sheriff's office in Waco, Texas, who's quite notorious. Huh. But they were relearning how to do police work. They've adopted our major case management and major crimes techniques. They have adopted something that was created in the early 1980s by RCMP members and prosecutors here in Canada, and now it's used North America wide. It's taught at Quantico, the FBI. It's our version that the RCMP created. The undercover program is world famous. We, RCMP members, go to the United States to conduct undercover operations on behalf of the FBI and other police services.
You got to be wired differently to do that for work.
You're well trained. You're well trained.
I have no problem acknowledging where my hard line is drawn, and I can't imagine going undercover with murderers and organized crime. I just can't even imagine how you'd need to be wired.
But the way the RCMP does it is it's effective, but it's also the safest way of doing it, because the Americans used to throw their undercover operators into, say, organized crime, and they would go and they would work their way up for years.
Donnie Brasco, perfect example.
Well, what happens is a Stockholm syndrome sets in. They start identifying with the people they're targeting because they haven't had the contact with their police handlers. So that's a whole nother story, but that's just what we taught the Americans. Jim, was it Jim Belushi's brother died of a heroin overdose?
I think Jim Belushi.
Was it Jim Belushi?
Yeah, I think so.
One of the Belushis. Anyways, the RCMP had a role in that investigation. A huge role.
Pardon me, not John Belushi. Pardon me.
Belushi.
Yeah.
Yes. John,
Jim Belushi is alive and well.
TV. Yeah.
Jim Belushi is alive and well.
So those are the kind of things.
And he died at the age of 33.
Yes.
March 5th of 1982.
Kathy Smith
after Kathy Smith confessed to dosing him with a lethal mixture of heroin and cocaine at the Chateau Marmont.
In California. Yeah.
Charged with involuntary manslaughter. Anyway, I'll let you tell the story.
Yeah, anyways, I mean, so this is the respect the RCMP has everywhere else in the world, in Canada, other than at the legislature here in Alberta. The whole firewall thing is taken over. So the government is, in my opinion, the government is doing or not doing things to make the RCMP look incompetent, withholding funding, underfunding. The relationship, as I understand it, with the various ministries that the RCMP is frosty by design. Because, of course, they have an agenda. The government has an agenda to push the Alberta Sheriff's Police Service. Now, I just happen to know a little bit about the Alberta Sheriffs, having spent 5 years working there.
Deputy Chief.
Deputy Chief. Great guys, great gals, very committed to their job. Here's an important distinction, and I've talked to hundreds of them over the course of my time there. They don't want to be police officers. They don't want to go to domestics. They don't want to go to murder scenes. They don't want to go to horrific accidents where body parts are splayed out all over the road. They don't want to work nights. Yes, they want a job in law enforcement or protection services. They want to work at the courthouse. They want to write some traffic tickets. If they had wanted to be police officers, both Edmonton, Calgary, and the RCMP have had hundreds of vacancies over the last 20 years that they're unable to fill. For the most part, there are a few sheriffs that use it as a stepping stone to get into municipal police services in the RCMP. For the most part, they don't want to be cops. But being a sheriff, as it was, is, I'm not going to say safer because it's not. You're still dealing with murders, but you're dealing in a much more controlled environment.
You're also doing like prisoner transfers and things like that. I mean,
you're doing dangerous work.
You're on the front line.
Yeah, but you're not working alone ever in the sheriff's department. You're always surrounded very closely by sheriffs who can back you up. You're not going purposely, you're not walking into dangerous situations like policemen do. School shootings. Policemen go in, engage the shooter, and shoot and kill him. Active shooters. Sheriffs don't do that kind of thing. Maybe at the legislature a little bit, but we haven't really tested that yet. But so there's a different mindset in sheriffs. They're not all clamoring to be a police officer in high-level Alberta. They want to live in Edmonton. They want all the amenities of the big city, Edmonton, Calgary, Red Deer, Grand Prairie, etc. So this thing about, we're just going to take all the sheriffs out of the courthouse, replace them with private security guards, and we're going to spread those sheriffs out all over the province. That's a fantasy. That's a fantasy that's not going to work. Mike Ellis's plan. He hasn't talked to the union people in any meaningful way. They're pushing this forward. We've seen the Grand Prairie stumble so badly. Now they're taking community police
Grand
officers.
Prairie, Mayor Jackie Clayton would take issue with that.
Sure they would.
She wouldn't like it described as a stumble as they've transitioned from the RCMP to the Grand Prairie Municipal
stumble.
Police
But
Force.
her affiliations require her to say what she says, and I'll leave it at that.
Well, why in your characterization, what evidence is there that it has been a stumble? I'm not too familiar with it, to be honest with you, and Mayor Clayton's a personal friend, so I've heard that it's been a grand success.
No.
Okay,
no,
what's the counter argument?
No, the only reason that it's still surviving is the RCMP have been there to back them up. They don't have a major crimes unit in Grand Prairie. They don't have a detective unit in Grand Prairie that can hit the ground running. And that's the important stuff. I mean, you can do parking dogs, you can barking dogs, parking complaints, you can do the cat in the tree and all that sort of stuff. You can do the community liaison. That stuff's all easy. Now you get to the serious stuff, you need people with a lot of experience and a lot of training. That doesn't exist in Grand Prairie. They're offering Mounties incredible amounts of money to come up there and work. And I'm getting feedback saying that even with Mounties that are already living there, so living there isn't an issue, but they see how the police force is being run and they're going, that's not for me, that's not real policing. So there's a lot of smoke and mirrors going on up there. The government has been pumping money, pumping more and more money into that police service. And I heard $10 million additional dollars they asked for and were turned down. Why spend that money to fix a problem that doesn't really exist? I mean, there's always staffing issues in the RCMP. There's been a lot of sociological and culture changes where people don't want to be police officers anymore.
I don't blame them.
Yeah. Black Lives Matter had a real impact on the morale of police officers. I'm not saying that it was a bad movement. I'm not saying that it wasn't needed. But it had an impact on police officers.
It did turn a lot of heat and a lot of public scrutiny onto police officers.
Which comes with the job.
And I think also that there were important things accomplished by that movement and important conversations that were driven by that movement. But you're right. I have heard from law enforcement, you would know better than me, that it was a difficult period of time.
Yes. A lot of them felt they didn't have the local political support, that they were being thrown under the bus, when in fact a lot of the issues that cause the Black Lives type movements relate directly to funding from the municipal governments. They cut the police budgets. We've lost hundreds of police officers since when Ed Stelmach was premier. He put out 300 police officers in the province in about 2008, 2009. And those numbers the government has slowly pulled those back. Well, man,
it's expensive, right?
It's expensive, but at least Ed realized that the safety of Albertans comes before ideological firewall issues. And don't get me wrong, I worked with Ed. I was actually in charge of the team that looked after his personal safety. He's a prince of a man. But at the same time, again, that prism of political expediency. Does this get me votes? Do I need to cut the budget? So there's a lot of things at play here that have resulted in our police services not being able to do, and most 98% of police officers are honest, hardworking guys who want to do a good job, who live in the communities where they work and want to live in a safe community just like everybody else. So they go there and they put their heart and soul into their work. I've worked with them. It's a demanding job, and it takes a huge toll on your psyche and your outlook on people and everything else. But they're willing to do it. Now, they're well paid, but they're not going to be millionaires, I can tell you that. So the Alberta sheriffs, taking community peace officers, running them through a 9-week course or whatever, 27-week course or whatever it is, those guys, after that course, basically they can do two things. They can drive a police car and they can shoot a gun. But they can't investigate anything, even remotely complicated. They just don't have it. It takes easily 5 years before you're a capable detachment investigator, never mind a detective, somebody that can investigate a B&E to my garage, which is a sore point with me because that happened in 1992 and the police still haven't showed up. So to say everything is going well, what cloud is she living on? I'm sorry, but again, spin, ghosting, like things are not going well. They missed their April 1st deadline. There's issues there that hopefully won't come back and cause harm to the community, but the safety net isn't there.
Check out this photo, by the way. I'm sharing this just from a couple of weeks ago. Look at this fine fella. Hey, I had a chance to share the stage with former Premier Eddie Stelmach at the Consulting Engineers of Alberta Showcase Awards Gala just a couple of weeks ago. He was up there helping out Her Honor, presenting in the absence of the Lieutenant Governor's Award on behalf of the Consulting Engineers of Alberta, and the reaction that he gets when he goes up there. I know Ed Stelmach was kind of run out. He was piled on for suggesting a royalty review, and we're not here to adjudicate his career,
no.
but the respect that he still commands in the room, the amount of class that he still brings to a room is absolutely remarkable. Retired Deputy Chief Neil LeMay has been our guest, a former RCMP major crimes investigator. There's a couple of questions I want to end with. Let's make a commitment to this audience. We're going to wrap within the next 10 minutes.
All right.
These two questions are about the Edmonton Police Service in particular, and one of them is submitted on Facebook by Jessica, who's watching our live stream presented by California Closets. She says, I would love Neil's take on the facial recognition technology that is being utilized by the Edmonton Police Service and is connected to an Israeli company. This is that Axon Enterprise body camera that's equipped with AI-powered facial recognition, a first in Canada, a pilot involving up to 50 officers. Some reports have suggested that the tech is linked to a third-party Israeli firm known as Coresight AI. The pilot began in December of this past year, so it's been running for about 6 months. Tests facial recognition to scan for about 7,000 individuals on a high-risk watch list. People can read reporting by Taylor Lambert at cbc.ca for more on this. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so this is George Orwell, 1984?
84.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know if you tried to take it out of an Alberta library because the books have all been pulled. But yeah, Orwell, 84.
Well, we're going to be burning books here soon, I'm sure. Okay, so I've got a lot of mixed thoughts about this. So the first thing is this contract with Axon requires more scrutiny. So the city of Edmonton entered into this contract on a no-compete basis. They didn't put it out there for the proper tendering. $16 million. I have issues with that. Compounding that now is a group called the Major Cities Chiefs Associations, who sounds like a fairly benign group, but has been at the center of the controversy around the trip that Warren Driechel, Chief of Edmonton City Police, took to Israel. The MCCA, as I'll call them, the Major Cities Chiefs Association, is not like the Alberta Association of Chiefs, and it's not like the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police. It is an industry-run association with a very benign name. So when I heard that Chief Dreichel was going, I've known about this group for a long time, and I've stayed away from them because it is just ethically a minefield. And Chief Dreichel should have known this. Ben Henderson should have known this.
Ben Henderson, chair of the police commission, former Edmonton city councilor, who gave the chief his blessing.
Yeah, so I don't know what Ben obviously didn't have all the information, because Ben's a pretty sharp guy. You know, he's got a long history of service here in the city of Edmonton. But one of the supporters and a huge financial donor to the Major Cities Chiefs Association is Axon, which the city of Edmonton gave a $16 million contract, no-compete contract for these body cams. So I have issues with that whole process. It stinks to high heaven, because basically the chief got rewarded by convincing procurement at the city of Edmonton to give this $16 million contract without any competition, in light of the fact that the province of Alberta was doing a true RFP process as per the law to equip all Alberta police forces in the next year. So something stinks there too. So that's my first issue with that. Now, the next plus of this is that these body cams are not comparing faces to pictures on Facebook or X or any other social media accounts. What they're doing as using as their library is the prisoner photos at the police station, as I understand it. So as I understand it, if I'm a wanted person for a serious crime, this camera takes various data points on my face and compares it to a data bank that the police maintain. It doesn't have innocent people in there. It just has people who have been under investigation for various reasons by the police service. So that's better than some of the earlier iterations where police were using technology and then scraping it off the internet from somebody wishing somebody a happy birthday or an anniversary picture or whatever, which ICE is doing in the United States. So that's better. Now, the privacy commissioner needs to be all over this. She needs to literally have people in that office to make sure that it's running as they say it has. I've had a lot of contact with the EPS IT department in the last 3 years. In my opinion, there's serious issues with the way that department's being run. Like I said before, I'm a pretty severe critic of EPS, CPS, and the RCMP, because sometimes they do things to polish their image that are not in the interests of public safety. So on that issue, there's some goods, there's some bads, but boy, does it need to be monitored closely, because it is ripe for abuse.
I want to end with, this is something heavy, but you invoked your reputation and your heft and your influence to call for a criminal probe into Edmonton's police chief, Warren Driechel. I'm showing a report here at globalnews.ca. This is a very difficult story involving the murder of an 8-year-old girl by the name of Nina Napope. She was killed by Ashley Rattlesnake, who was sentenced to 8 years. The Edmonton Police Service, I'll let you tell the story, but basically for this audience, my understanding of this is the Edmonton Police Service basically intervened in this investigation and in the process of the prosecution, basically saying if a plea agreement was reached, in other words, if the suspect, if the accused in this case was to plead down to manslaughter, right? Or if the Edmonton Police Service was not satisfied with the outcome of the prosecution, they would publicly release evidence. And the reports are, you would have more insight than me, that in particular, I mean, this beautiful little girl, this 8-year-old little girl who was callously and heinously murdered, that there were details of this case that would trouble everybody. I mean, obviously it's the murder of a child, but in particular, the final few hours of her life were apparently horrific. and the EPS threatened to release this evidence to the public if they were not satisfied with the outcome of the prosecution. Take us into this, why you decided to speak out and call for the criminal probe into the sitting police chief in Edmonton.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me start with a little bit of background. So in a democracy, the police have a defined role. The prosecution service has a defined role. And these are not just convenient conventions. They are things that have been worked out through case law, through statute interpretation, through the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So it's a very complex issue. So the job of the police, and the only job of the police, is to collect evidence. Period, full stop. Now, I can tell you that if you've ever investigated the murder of a child, it is hard to control your emotions, especially a child that has been so severely abused, beaten. I've read the transcripts at trial from start to finish. I've looked at the evidence that the Crown had available in front of them. It's available at the courthouse. There's no great secret here. The publication ban is off. And I've read through those transcripts in great deal. And this is something that is, this is what happens when you see too much trauma, is these things seize you. They seized me because it was so horrific, and the things that the Edmonton police chief did was so wrong. In the transcript, it becomes very clear that there is no evidence of first-degree murder. So what that tells me is, and this goes back to, this is also a reflection on Megan Hankiewicz, I believe her name is, who's the former prosecutor, now the in-house counsel for the Edmonton Police Service. So Megan should know what the elements of the offense are. Elements of an offense are what the police and the Crown must prove to get a conviction in court. Very complex, very complex. There's three types of murder. Well, let me say there's three types of murder and homicide. Let me start there. So they're not synonymous. They don't mean the same thing. Homicide means that another person killed the victim. That's all it means. So we have culpable and non-culpable homicide. Culpable means you're responsible for the death of a person by illegal means. That's murder. Culpable homicide. Murder is culpable homicide. Now there's lots of homicide, and the big that isn't culpable. And the example is a police officer goes to a scene where a man's shooting a gun, an active shooter in a school. Police officer goes in, neutralizes the target by shooting him twice in the chest and once in the head, which is the standard protocol. That is considered non-culpable homicide. It's still homicide. The manner of death is homicide. The mechanism of death is he was shot to death and probably bled to death. So homicide and murder don't mean the same thing. So that's important to understand. Now, within the murder category, there are two types of murder. There's first-degree murder, which is planned and deliberate, which is a real, I could speak for hours about that. The other one is second-degree murder, which has both of those have specific requirements of intent. I intended to kill that person. The best example of that is somebody arrives at a house or a bar, gets out of his car with a gun and says, "I'm going to shoot you," and then proceeds to shoot you. Well, that establishes intent. He intended to shoot you by the words he spoke, and he shot you. So we've got one ingredient of first-degree murder. Now, the deliberate part is you have to show that there was some planning involved. Well, you brought a shotgun, maybe you did some surveillance to find out where the person drank. I mean, there's all sorts of combinations that can lead to that conclusion. And then you thought about the consequences of, if I murder this guy, what does that entail? So those are first and second degree murder. Now, second degree murder could also encompass things where the intent, the planning and deliberation wasn't present. So if you don't have planning and deliberation evidence, you move to second degree murder. And there's a section in the criminal code, section 231, that says if you commit a robbery or certain other offenses and you have a gun and you end up shooting somebody, you should have known that person would die if you shot them during your criminal act. So that's second degree murder. Manslaughter is all homicide that is not first and second degree murder.
You see it applied in like bar fights.
Bar fights. You see it applied in all sorts of situations where somebody dies as a result of action. So there's
vehicular manslaughter, right?
Yeah, that's another category.
I didn't mean to send us on a tangent.
Yeah, there's several others. There's criminal negligence causing death. There's impaired driving causing death, and several other things that also play into this. So as I read through the evidence in that case, I'm just thinking here, I'll make sure I'm not violating any laws here. So reading through the transcripts of preliminary inquiry, it becomes clear that there's no evidence of what caused the blow to her head. There is a witness in the house who was in the bathroom at the time of the incident, and he hears certain noises, and there's an inference. There is an inference about what happened, and it's a good, strong inference, and it's backed up by the evidence of the medical examiner who says yes. The other problem is we have a whole list of things that contributed to her death: sepsis, broken bones, etc. She was abused horribly, and my heart goes out to the family. And I don't mean this as a slight to the family, but again, we're dealing in the cold world of the criminal justice system. So the prosecutor has these challenges. They don't know what the fatal blow was, although they believe it was her head smashing into a wall and causing her death. They don't have an eyewitness to that event, and they have no evidence of intent and deliberation. None. Zero. So for the police to say that this is first-degree murder is their emotion speaking. Because on a cold review of what can be proven in a court, and a court doesn't care about emotion. That's why trials are always 18 months down the road, because all the emotions have settled and things are very factual, very evidence, and very procedurally based.
Is that true? Is that why they do that?
Yeah, it's one
I thought
of the
it was
reasons.
just delays.
Well, it is, but you've got to let the emotions settle. Now, you've got a witness now who, according to the preliminary inquiry transcripts, is an abuser of drugs, has memory issues, has psychotic breaks with reality. So basically, you have a very poor witness. You have a witness that sees certain things. You have a witness that actually participates in some aspects of moving the body afterwards. So you don't have a good case. You have a horrible case in the hands of the prosecutor.
And let's also point out, I'm a civilian, but I have covered trials before, that if a Crown prosecutor ambitiously lays a heavier charge and is unable to seek the conviction, right? Like, there's a higher burden of proof, right? And so if in the prosecutor's professional judgment, if they don't believe that they have the evidence, or they won't be able to find a conviction there, they may lay what would be perceived by the public as a lesser charge because they believe they can secure the conviction, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to use a rather trivial analogy, but the bird in the hand versus the two birds in the bush.
Yeah.
There's nothing to a family who lost a loved one where the accused is acquitted at trial because of problems with witnesses or evidence or whatever the case may be, to end up with nothing at the end of the day. At least they've got a conviction. Now, sentencing, that's another issue. And sentencing allows for all those horrible details to come out. Not in the trial itself. That's not the place for that. But it's in the sentencing where the judge can hear all the the details of what that child went through and how it contributed. So there's a separation of those two for a reason. So it doesn't bias the trial and make the judge, which is very rare, act emotionally. So, on my reading of the evidence, the Crown did the right thing. Manslaughter is homicide that is not first or second degree murder. There is no intent that needs to be proven in manslaughter. All that needs to be proven is the death was caused and various other things, and I won't get too much into detail in that. So when I read the evidence based on my experience, the Crown was 100% right in what they did for a number of reasons. Closure for the family. The courts, the Supreme Court, the courts of appeal in Alberta, they don't care about victims. And this is a cold thing to say, but the law is about the law. And politicians have introduced this whole victims' rights thing. Well, that is a dangerous road, because up until very recently, there was no victims' rights. And we read victim impact statements now at sentencing, not during the trial, to keep the trial fair. You have to remember the role of the prosecutor is not to secure a conviction, as some associate deputy ministers might say in the government and have said in the past. It is not to secure a conviction. It is to ensure the accused gets a fair trial. There's a difference. There's a big difference. So everything the Crown has goes to the prosecutor. All the evidence, all of that stuff goes to the defense. Everything the prosecutor has. Defense is under no obligation to give what he or she has to the prosecutor. So it's the Blackstone's ratio. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's a cornerstone of our justice system that basically says 10 men should go free, 10 guilty men should go free, lest we put an innocent man in jail. So that's what the police and the prosecutor have to work under. Everything is designed to protect the accused, to get a fair trial, to make sure we don't send a innocent person to jail, and that happens. I've seen it with my own eyes. The Freedom Project in the United States, DNA has been a godsend to releasing innocent people from horrible prison sentences. So with that in mind, now I've got a chief of police who is basically extorting the prosecution for all the wrong reasons. Now, to give him some credit, I don't know if he understood what he was doing, and I think the justice in sentencing made it pretty clear what the justice thought by reducing Miss Rattlesnake's sentence by a year because of what the Edmonton police had done. But this is not a trivial matter. The police chiefs should not be put into that position, I think, as Ben Henderson mentioned, because they're remorseful about their use of steroids. In my opinion, police officers who use any illicit substance don't belong in a police force, never mind belong as chief of police. That's just my opinion. And I've invested a lot of police officers over the years, some for murder, as a matter of fact. So when I saw this all playing out, I was shocked. And that's the reason I called for him to be prosecuted. He is not above the law. No one is above the law. There are specific statutes that prohibit the conduct that he engaged in the Criminal Code of Canada. And we need a clear, unbiased investigation of the facts to ensure that the integrity of the police service is held up, and we cannot make exceptions for one individual's discomfort.
That's Neil LeMay, former Deputy Chief, Alberta Sheriff, longtime major crimes investigator with the RCMP, now a global security consultant. I appreciate you taking the question. I want to also note that want to recognize the amazing and impossibly difficult job that law enforcement does, in particular investigating crimes against children. I felt almost a bond moment with us early in this interview when you reminded me that you were also in Red Deer when 3-year-old Alex Fekete was killed. Yeah. It's a difficult thing to report on in courtroom. I can't imagine what it's like to attend that crime scene. John in our live chat says, protect this man, Neil, at all costs. We need his voice now more than ever. Others are suggesting, Neil, that you need your own show. Others are saying that they're going to be sharing this episode. Many of you, Peter says, Neil, for premier. Justin says, this is quite the episode. 80s Fanify says, I feel like I'm taking a class. I've been taking notes this morning. Others of you just sharing how much you appreciate the time. Neil, I want to thank you for this. I didn't think that this episode was going to go 2 hours, but the wealth of information that you've provided, the insights, your candor is so appreciated, in particular to bring this full circle on the story we're talking about, the data breach affecting 3 million people. Unimaginable, infuriating. You've provided us a steady voice on this, and we couldn't appreciate it more. Thank you for doing this.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, hang tight with me while I rap, okay?
All right.
Real Talkers, these episodes don't happen without the support of amazing partners, and that includes our friends at UCAN Youth Services. I want to encourage you to subscribe to follow their Instagram account at UCAN Youth Services. That's where you'll see how they've been opening this week. They've been celebrating the trades this week, and many of their graduates, these are young adults, 18 to 24, that have stepped out of harm's way. They've taken a brave step away, in many cases, from their friend groups, some cases out of a gang lifestyle. Several of them have been able to invoke the resources, to tap into the resources of UCAN, to step out of a scenario that can only be described as human trafficking. I mean, these are powerful individual stories, and these young people are being trained to enter sectors like retail and hospitality and construction, a new lease on life, a path toward economic independence. You can hear it in my voice. We are so proud to support UCAN Youth Services as our charity of choice for 2026. And we encourage you. You see that bell that fella's ringing right there? That means that individual there was just able to secure employment, a job interview that went the right way. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of success stories out of UCAN every single month. And if you're an employer, we encourage you, if you're looking to hire motivated, supported young people, entry-level workers, regardless of the sector you're in, they can find a fit. UCAN is doing exactly that. It's our support. It's their success. You can connect with them today at ucan.ca. And for those of you that are in charge of not just managing your family's finances, not just tapping on the shoulder experts to help you with your retirement planning, but also with organizations and associations, you may not be thinking about changing your financial advisor right now. You've built trust over years of conversations and decisions. The confidence matters, but a lot of times people are left in the lurch when their financial manager retires or moves on. North Road Investment Council was designed to take that risk off the table. They're structured as a team, so your financial plan isn't dependent on any single individual. It's also great to get a second set of eyes on your retirement or investment management strategies, and North Road can work with you on a fee-only basis. In other words, you don't need to switch advisors to get started with them. That's why they're working with professionals like engineers, architects, physicians, business owners who are looking for clarity and confidence in their complex financial lives. They're looking for that astute advice because they know what's up. They understand how business works. You can connect with the team at North Road Investment Council today, from retirement and tax planning to insurance, family education, digital risk management. That's what Neil's been talking to us about today. Your financial life is a journey, and it deserves a team that's built for the long road ahead. You can learn more by visiting northroadic.com. Now, I know that we're going to have a ton of feedback from this conversation with Neil LeMay. If anything, he has leveled up our understanding of what's happening around us and how we need to respond on a multitude of fronts. You can let us know what you're doing in that regard. We appreciate your emails to talk@ryanjespersen.com. And as we wrap this episode, I also want to remind you, if you need an outlet, the Flamethrower is coming up in our next episode, presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. Give us your hottest takes to talk@ryanjespersen.com. We'll be happy to read them as we wrap a week that has been an eventful one, to say the very least. The Real Talk Roundtable tomorrow. Amber Bracken, Jana Prude, and Danny Parody, 3 incredible journalists making a big mark in the world around them. We hope you'll join us then.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton, member emerita Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjespersen.com.